So we've talked a little bit about things that you shouldn't do in the sleep lab because it's dangerous and electrical things will happen to you. But let's get a little bit more in depth about how electricity can affect the human body. Obviously, we can handle some electricity since our bodies work on electrical signals, but how much is too much, and how easy is it to get a lethal electric shock? Just like metal, but not as good as metal, the human body is a conductor of electricity. Like we've said before, it is electrically controlled and operates in response to its own electrical signals. Different people have different responses, resistances, and sensitivities to electricity. So, what is an electric shock? It's a sudden and violent impression caused by the passage of electric current through any part of the body. Electricity passes very quickly, almost instantaneously, very close to the speed of light. But by the time you realize what's happening, it's already happened or continues to happen. There are two general opinions online. One says current kills you, and the other says not without high voltage it doesn't. Both voltage and current are intertwined and codependent when it comes to Ohm's law, along with resistance, meaning when one changes, so do the other. Typically, voltages under 30 volts are harmless. Once the voltage reaches 31 or more volts, precautions must be taken to prevent an electrical shock, a severe reaction, a burn, or death. So how is it you can survive a stun gun zap, which can have a pack a punch of like 50,000 volts? Because a stun gun typically has an average current of 1.9 milliamps, which is survivable. The other part of the equation is resistance, which would be the person getting stunned, and the body's average resistance being between 500 and 1,000 ohms. Certain websites say an effective stun gun will have at least 3 milliamps, whereas the highest amperage stun guns on the market have between 4.5 and 4.9. We'll talk a little later about how much current it takes to part your hair the hard way. Electrical current perception refers to when we feel or sense an electrical flow. The conventional threshold of when a person conceives an electrical current is approximately 0.5 milliamps for most people, and that's more than 99% of the population. Excuse me. Just like water hoses, electrical components like wires can leak electricity as well. It's how much current flows out is the issue. The industry standard for electric devices is half a milliamp of leakage current. However, when it comes to heavy-duty industrial equipment, some may exceed that value. Not all electrical components are made perfectly or the same. Resistors, for instance, are supposed to be guaranteed or rated to work at a specific setting. However, if you were to compare the minuscule voltages they are capable of differing by, you might be surprised how different two of the same thing can be. We call this resistor tolerance, meaning how much tolerance is there from differing from what's marked value is. For instance, a resistor might have a 5% tolerance, meaning the actual resistance could be 5% higher or lower. And this is generally accepted as long as it does what it's supposed to. Equipment that's dangerous because of greater leakage current are usually marked with a warning. The let-go current of 6 to 8 milliamps is considered the maximum current that a patient can tolerate and still release the conductor by using muscles directly stimulated by the current. Meaning 6 to 9 milliamps of current is the most you can stand and still decide to let go of whatever is shocking you because it's not quite enough to totally take over the electricity controlling you. Specifically, the let go current for men averages about 9 milliamps, and for women it's about 6 milliamps. At about 100 milliamps of current, cardiac fibrillation can occur, which is not conducive to keeping you alive, obviously. Remember, electricity flows through the path of least resistance. This is a nice chart of how much resistance the average human body has, as well as the let go and safe currents for adults. Ordinary household outlets and most office outlets have a 120 volt output. When applied with Ohm's law, 120 volts divided by the average resistance of a human body, which is approximately 500 ohms, the current is 240 milliamps. 240 milliamps is a lot more than the 20 milliamp higher limit of the let go, and more than double what it takes to cause cardiac fibrillation. So just with normal electrical outlets found everywhere is more than sufficient to cause a lethal event. Electricity does not flow quite as fast as the speed of light, which is approximately 300 million meters per second, which is 186,000 miles per second. Oh, that is incredibly fast. It's hard for me to wrap my head around that. Electricity doesn't move that fast, but it is a lot closer to the speed of light than anything our bodies can do, and I think we can argue that it's faster than we can react. Although we have fuses and circuit breakers to open the circuit when something happens, or disconnect the circuit so electrons no longer flow, they are not reliable against human error. On the other hand, we have other outlet protection measures like a GFI, which stands for Ground Fault Interrupter. A GFI outlet is a specialized electrical socket that can detect current in the hot and neutral AC power lines. You're not supposed to have current in the neutral line. It's just supposed to sit neutral. You're supposed to have it in the hot line. So this thing can detect it. When the currents become unequal, that means the ground wire has current which opens or disconnects the circuit. These outlets are commonly found in kitchens and bathrooms where water is commonly used. The garage, maybe. Outside. A person who is shocked by a current from one of these devices is likely to have some reaction, but they should be protected from a severe electrical shock which may cause fibrillation. Whenever the device is tripped, a red light comes on and all you have to do is hit the reset button for the outlet to work again. The other button is to test it. It kind of it simulates a ground fault, and it should click and show a light, and then you can reset it again. Paralysis is one of the many effects exposure to high voltage electricity may inflict. Due to the nervous system's operative functioning dependence upon electrical impulses, the nerves are susceptible to electrical overload. When these nerves are essentially fried, they are unable to create their own electrical connections anymore because the damage has opened the biological circuit. This is generally a higher voltage than just what comes out of the electrical outlet. However, many of our appliances and light-duty machinery have capacitors and transformers capable of high voltage outputs that can cause paralysis. For instance, do you remember old computer monitors and TVs that were big boxes? You might not, but you might have seen them in pictures. We called those CRT monitors, or cathode ray tube monitors, and they needed a lot of electricity to work. Remember that capacitors are like quick charge, quick drain batteries that operate in milliseconds, so a lot of voltage can go quickly to where it's needed. One capacitor in a CRT monitor was capable of holding 30,000 volts. And there were dozens, if not hundreds of capacitors in these things. They were incredibly dangerous to work with because some of these capacitors, even if they weren't plugged in, they could still hold a charge for weeks. You have to know how to drain all the energy out of the equipment for it to truly not hold a charge. When something like the internet or something stops working and you have to unplug it and then plug it back in, that's because you are taking away the electron flow that is supporting that poor performance. What makes our phones get slow or the internet stop working? There is an electrical interference and radio waves and all sorts of invisible forces that we can't see that are just everywhere. And sometimes These forces are just enough to knock one of those bits of information on a chip off just one digit. And that is enough to slow your information to a crawl. If you stop the power to that chip, unplug it so that everything that has power does not anymore, you reset it. Remember, nothing in electricity is perfect other than diagrams and schematics. By the way, we do have, with these chips and how they're prone to parity error. That's what that's called when a bit is changed from a 1 or a 0 or a 0 to a 1. How do we go to space with all the radiation and cosmic rays that are out there to change all the bits? Well, we do have special memory called, I don't remember what it's called, but it has extra bits for parity error. And if something doesn't match up, it knows that there's a problem. So that's a lot more reliable. But integrated circuits can be great, but not if you drop them a lot, And we haven't really had them long enough to really know the durability of chips. Who knows? Paralysis is when there is a disconnect, either chemical or electrical or physical, between the brain and some part of the whole or of the spinal cord and nerves. The effects of paralysis are the most serious if they affect the respiratory system, which causes respiratory failure. Not only does the electrical current disrupt the body's intrinsic electrical signals, it can also just flat out burn out the nerves and the tissue. Important things to remember. Currents above the let go and reaction current level may cause involuntary movement and trigger a serious accident. If the current continues to pass for too long, it can cause a person to collapse, become unconscious, asphyxiate, or even expire. Alternating current with a frequency as low as 20 microamps may produce, that's milliamps, may produce ventricular fibrillation if it is directly introduced to the heart. Current in the order of milliamps introduced to nerve centers can cause respiratory inhibition even after the current is interrupted. It doesn't take a lot of current to cause cardiac arrests. Only 100 milliamps is what it takes to cause fibrillation, and normal electrical outlets are capable of producing 240 milliamps of current, more than sufficient enough to cause serious injury. Electrical current may produce burns and raise the core body temperature to a life-threatening level. If high current or high voltage electricity doesn't kill you straight off, it will eventually, with severe burns and other complications stemming from the central and peripheral nervous system. It's just like frying your electrical equipment with home too much juice. You do the same thing with your body because it too operates with electrical signals. This is a nice chart of current and potential reactions. And here's a nice diagram showing the potential ways electricity can flow through your body. Notice the ways that include the heart. Those are possible lethal situations. All right, I believe that is it for Unit 3. Good job. Study hard, and we'll see you in the next one.